I don't know if I've met everyone.
Oh,
I've
okay.
met all hours and the principal parents. I can't.
And Richmond, you probably already introduced yourself.
Not really, kind of. I'm Richmond, Kelly, I guess I'm the South County member.
Their new jam.
Yeah,
Yes. Excellent. We appreciate you taking the time and being willing to serve.
no, South County, there's a lot of people, I get a lot of people talking to me these days about South County.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff happening.
Yes, there, yeah, so be good to get some information that way anyway.
Did you want us to introduce?
If you would like.
Willis Handle, Lakeland Fire Chief and President of the Chiefs Association.
Patrick Wright, Lakeport Fire.
Now I'll talk about cannabis industry.
And Ruby Met's office assistant.
Who do we have online so far?
I just saw Mark. Oh, looks like another man.
Cool. Margo.
And then I'm assuming Angela.
Angela always comes in as guest.
Yeah.
Guest. Hey, Patrick,
Hi.
are you presenting today?
No, I just wanted.
Oh, cool.
Sit on this one.
Skip it.
No.
Yeah, because we reworded it on the agenda so that task force to be able to take action instead of just recommendation.
Yeah.
So then after we really approve the minutes, let's backtrack on the stuff that was talked about in the minutes to see if they want to just take action on those items. And on track and trace is where we told people we'd have a table, but I think that I misunderstood what Jennifer was asking because we didn't find much in California law, but we'll wait. 102. All right, for those of you joining us in Zoom world, we have 3 voting members of the task force so far. We are still waiting for another 2, and we have 13 minutes to wait. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to go get a beverage or something.
Seems interesting, the new California Fire Code. Rumor has it they have a great deal of material on cannabis. So we're hoping that that is going to,
When will that be available for review?
who knows? We're hoping to get, an idea what the draft. So Paul and Autumn were both following up on that.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. How's life in Lakeport Fire?
Busy.
Yeah.
Trying to get some relief. Be nice. Don't see it coming. Lots of stuff going on. So,
Yeah.
but Tractor Supply and Marshalls are
Oh, yeah.
across the hump, and
Woohoo!
Oh, nice.
Tractor Supply can start loading in and getting their shelves all set up and their ceiling closed up. All that good stuff, and Marshalls is still putting walls in and trying to get all that done. So, but
And we still don't have a third tenant.
no, I heard one rumor, but I'm not gonna spread it around because it doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
So, and
Well, now
that,
when we know.
and that was probably almost 2 months ago.
Oh,
So, yeah, no, I had to take on the owner of the building last week because Tractor Supply couldn't get, I put a lock on Tractor Supply so they couldn't do any work because we have no sprinkler plans. And there's no copy of any sprinkler plans for that building because the city doesn't have an archive back that far, and we don't have an archive back that far.
wow.
So there's no sprinkler plans. So we told them they had to produce sprinkler plans, and our local sprinkler guy that's Marshall's contracted with went all the way back to the water supply.
Hey, well, look, you're number 4. You're still waiting.
I know that Rebecca's expected a couple minutes late, and we just walked past Jen Smith, so she should be there momentarily as well. You're not lying.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so we're,
Taking an edge.
so we can sign off on pressure tests. And Marshalls will be, should be able to final their sprinkler plans this afternoon.
I can scoot over.
Actually.
The case of officer overrated.
Yeah, and at this point, sold last week.
It did?
Yeah, closed escrow.
You really have more important things to say than records, but whatever you say.
It's fine. So they're,
Huh.
so, you know, they had plans to build a 3-story office building at the end of Bevins.
Yeah.
We had the pre-meeting for that several months ago. And I'm not quite sure what changed, but they were able to go out, they got this, they acquired this point
I
and
feel relief.
they're gonna take at least the 3 of the suites to the ground. So the bowling alley, the one that's missing the roof, and then the old gymnastics one.
Okay,
So those will be taken to the ground.
now what's their plan?
Sounds like we haven't had our meeting yet. We're expecting a meeting within a month, but it sounds like they're gonna, instead of build that 3-story over on Bevins, they're gonna move it over to that side.
Too bad to lose the retail. But we haven't had it there in a long time.
Yeah, and they said they may have, they may still offer up some retail space.
That'd be cool, there's a lot of room.
But at the same time, that whole area is becoming a professional center because you've got the new courthouse going in.
Mhm,
And
That's
then,
true.
and then the city wants our property off of Larrikey, the corner of Larrikey, they want that for I'm gonna screw this up, I wanna say
Well.
navigation center.
Yeah.
I was gonna say transitional, but it's navigation center,
Well, I
so they want that parcel.
know both areas.
And so, you know, and that one strip of that strip mall isn't retail anyway, it's all,
Make it a lot better.
it's all office.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still have a gateway project, I mean, that's gonna be office space.
I do.
Awesome.
Such a cool.
And now it's a property owner that works for people.
Relatively recent thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's,
has money.
yes.
It
That's
is
a big,
property,
hey, Jennifer.
For a while before I
That's
moved
nice.
away, but it's not bad, but it's.
So, yeah,
You-
so
you
that's
really spray it,
exciting.
let me tell you,
It's
it's,
pretty, but it's not.
I'm looking
No,
forward to
no,
what they come up
we
with.
can't.
This should just.
Are you
Did
Yeah,
Disney's-
you said it.
you,
Move,
did you
build
have
in
a seat for water? Did you get?
Rental
a
center.
It's like a lot of.
Private school
Yeah,
on the lake shore.
yeah.
We got 2 new water, at least 2 new.
That corner.
Really enjoying them
With-
work.
with that.
Yeah, but I mean to say, but it's also.
Well, with.
Oh, water.
It is
Yeah.
not a pleasant smell.
Yeah.
I used to live in Calistoga and we got a shower well
Yeah,
on Greenwood.
and then we have a couple,
You in the shower, just go,
water
you were just showering.
lines
They pulled
upgrade
it-
this
they
summer
pulled
for
up
the
the
city
number.
and pavement projects going on for the city.
I had a well that was probably, I'm gonna guess 30-40.
Yeah, well, I get that, most of those I just
Yeah,
get
you
to
a shower,
sit,
just be time for-
they tell me what they're doing and we figure out how we're gonna respond, that's all I gotta do.
All right, we now have 5. We have quorum on site. Convene this meeting at 1:08. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll start with a welcome, and I want to just call out our newest member, Richmond Kelly, who is joining us here as the South County representative. Go ahead and wave for the Zoom. There you go. All right, so let's go ahead and do roll call whenever Ruby's ready. We have some visitors today also. This is an exciting day for me.
Right, William Wise,
Present.
Richmond Kelly,
Present.
Catherine Vanderwall, Rebecca Harper,
She's en route, just FYI.
Jennifer Smith,
Here.
Nara Delbaka,
Present.
Robert Geary, and then a fire district representative.
She's dependent.
Thank you very much. First item on our agenda is consideration of minutes from the March 4th, 2024 task force meeting. Just to refresh yourself on the minutes. We did make one revision, but it's basically just typographical. Instead of Mireya G listed 95 times, that we just switched it down to direct return. So that's a non-substantive change. And thank you that Ruby was able to get it done so quickly. Are there any other questions, concerns, recommendations, or corrections or amendments on the minutes?
So I'm not sure if they're material or not, so forgive me if I'm raising something that doesn't need to be raised, Maria, but I noted that we had comment during the discussion on the Board of Supervisors update, and I wonder if that's supposed to be reflected or not. Oh, actually, I beg your pardon. Only, the following people spoke college today. Okay, so actually it's reflected. I apologize.
No
Never
problem.
mind.
It's important. Good catch. Way to be reading.
Well,
You have a hand raised in
Hey,
the,
Rebecca. Awesome. Let's note that Rebecca is at 110. If there are no further questions in the task force, we'll check the Zoom room. Looks like Angela. Yes, you've been asked to unmute.
Yes, it is, Angela. Thank you. So on the meeting minutes, it says it was called to order at 1 o'clock, but I think it was closer to like 1:10. Ruby started taking roll call at 1:12. So I don't know if you guys want to change that.
That is a good
And then-
point.
And then, if Maria, if you can put in there that, you did state that if quorum isn't called by if there isn't quorum by 1:15, the meeting will be adjourned. That wasn't noted in there. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
wasn't actually action taken by the task force. That was just kind of my unilateral decision that everybody nodded to.
Yeah, if we can note it in there so that it doesn't if it happens again, we don't have to go back. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, we did note it, in section 5, where it says that the consideration of minutes for February 12th. Wanted to look at that, Angela, because it does say on there, it says an amendment was made to section 7, and then it has.
Yeah, she said a time limit. So I think what we could do is let's add after the approval of those minutes, let's just add a notation that, future meetings will wait until 12:15 for quorum.
Okay.
1:15.
Thank you.
I have a question on part 3. Board of Supervisors update. I don't know if I'm reading this correctly. The Board of Supervisors recommended C1 in delivery only. I thought C1's commercial and was specifically did not want
Right.
delivery only.
Yep. Removal. Let's say, Board of Supervisors recommended removal of C1 in delivery only. Anything further? Either in the room or on Zoom? If not, we'll bring it back to the task force for action.
We don't have the same folks here today. I'm good to move this.
Sorry,
We don't have the same folks here. It's not the same.
how many were absent at that meeting? Just Richmond,
Yeah, Catherine was there, but she's not here today.
right? Do we have 4? But the rest of you 4 were here.
Four of us were here, yeah.
That we can still. Well, Richmond can't vote because he wasn't there, but if we have 4, that's a majority of the people present, but it's not a majority of the membership. Do we have anybody else coming? Actually, no, we have 5, even with Richmond not voting, right? We have, but we didn't have fire guides
But it
there.
has to be the people that were there,
Yeah.
because you can't.
what is it? 5 of the people who were there, or a majority of the people who were? Or wasn't there some other threshold a second ago? Is it?
I think it was majority of voting members, which would still be 5
would be fine.
of people who were there. All right. Then we can table this one.
Okay, good, because I have another, I thought a discussion about that we had expected Andrew, or I'm sorry, not specifically Andrew, but the department to get the verbiage language recommendations from county council. And then we had a lengthy discussion that county council was not going to provide that we had to provide it and they would review it. Does that need to be in here?
Which section is that? Is that got minutes also?
I don't see it, but I don't know. Is that the general?
Kind of more of an overall update. Put that in there, that is not limited to one of our items. Board of Supervisors updates. Minutes. Okay, how about this? On item 6, at the top. After the opening of discussion, let's add a sentence that says, the task force and, no, let's say. Okay, so it doesn't,
I think we need to somehow acknowledge the process that needs to be taken.
The task force will continue its review of development standards, comma, to be drafted into draft ordinance verbiage at a later date. Semicolon. And reviewed by county council prior to public circulation of the draft ordinance. So I use draft and ordinance a lot in that sentence, but don't
You
ask me to
think that
repeat it.
covers though what? One more time, because aren't, what you're thinking is we had requested,
We had requested
Right,
that.
and that's not how we do things. However, what we're doing now is gathering the recommendations that will then get reflected as changes or amendments in the draft ordinance and changes in wording. But county council doesn't write this thing for us. They're gonna vet it to make sure it's correct or true as to form is what they're reviewing.
So the 3 actions that would be added to the notes then were task force will continue to review development standards, which will then be drafted at a later date as a draft ordinance, and later then be reviewed by county council.
Exactly.
So then when are we going to start? Shouldn't we be drafting, if we're gonna draft that language, shouldn't we draft it in the moment?
The way I was picturing it, since this is gonna be a whole new ordinance, is the minutes from the last meeting, Ruby was noting the recommendations for amendments. Those are going to be gathered and collected in the minutes that we approve. And then once we're done, then I'm gonna start working on that ordinance. So, but to craft wording when we don't have that whole ordinance for everybody to go through to make sure it's synchronized and all working parts together, I don't know that that would move us along as quickly as or as efficiently as making the recommendations on the different things and then drafting that ordinance that will then come back here to make sure that we haven't missed anything.
I personally think that it makes more sense to review sections and then draft language for those sections. Sure, we can compile it to review holistically at the end, but I think we'll lose some of our train of thought if we're discussing it and then
Coming back at a later
coming
date.
back. And yeah,
We can do that.
I don't know that.
And I know this is part of the discussion of approving the minutes or not, so. I don't know if we need to close out this section and move on with how we think that can go.
Okay,
So we're not gonna approve this minutes right now anyway.
correct. We're tabling the minutes to a later meeting. Okay,
But I would like to develop some time to discuss that because I think we'll lose a lot of the context if we don't draft it in the moment.
okay,
And then there might be a big chunk of time where there's nothing we're doing, and I think if we can get this done by the end of the year, that'd be amazing.
that is the goal. Yes, okay. Let's keep going. So the minutes are tabled. What's next? Let's get back then to the next item. Consideration of general requirements for cannabis activities. So. All right, what I had in mind was the recommendations or the discussions that we had last meeting that were reflected in the minutes that now we're not going to approve. was going to inform us on taking action on the items, because we couldn't take action on them last week or last meeting. So. Let's see where we got. Identification. Of emergency contacts. Okay, well, so the point of today's meeting was pretty much to take action on those items. It'll just, I think, take a little longer, but I don't see why we can't do it. We can use the unapproved minutes as guidance and just go back over it and take action as we see fit. So, open this up. Ruby's typing, Michelle's typing, we're recording. We can do this. Activity records. Okay, so at the last meeting, we talked about staff presenting an update regarding state regulations specific to record keeping. So we did do that review and we didn't find much. I'm wondering if we missed what was actually requested, because we found just additional stuff for track and trace. Thanks, let's see. The Department of Cannabis Control has adopted emergency regulations to implement track and trace requirements imposed by Assembly Bill 195. And these regulations require retail sales made via delivery to be recorded in the California Cannabis Track and Trace System. I remember, Jennifer, that you had some different points that I'm not sure were captured here.
There's a whole list in the state regulations. Cool. That the documents we need to keep that they inspect upon inspection.
That the state inspect?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we were gonna try and mirror that. Acknowledge that we're going to, that permittees need to keep all of those documents, plus if there is any additional local documentation.
Okay.
Which would probably be like employee, at this point, employee background checks.
General.
What was that, Nora?
Page 60, I'm in the regs, so page 66, the regs is record retention. General
I
record
also,
retention requirements.
sorry, also just wanted to let everyone know that Andrew's Andrew's out today, but he has accepted a position in the county of Napa. So I wanted to just publicly thank him for all of his efforts and all the work that he's done to help this task force move forward.
Flipped his cuffs, did he?
Yeah, he did. So we're gonna undergo a little bit of transition until we have it figured out for staff support. I think it'll take definitely more than me, to fill those shoes.
Is there somebody within the department that may take over as the cannabis program manager, or will that?
My
Be in
plan at this
fire.
point is actually to replace that position with a planner. So because of the workload as far as applications has become much more manageable in-house with our existing planning staff. But this is a different role now. This is more like legislation kind of oriented. And so we'll have to figure out how we're gonna cover that.
Maria, it's section 15037.
15037, yeah,
And it's general record retention requirements.
good.
So we could reference that. And then add any local records.
Okay. Cite the code plus county requirements. Does anybody want to work on specific verbiage, or are we okay with citing the code plus any additional county requirements?
6 things with some subset, if I can probably read it. It's like 250 words in.
Are we comfortable citing the code and the code number, knowing that, I mean, can we assume that that's going to be stable? Because I'd much rather do that
I would
than
do
make a whole list.
code name because the regs do change. The
Okay.
section, so you may want to just keep the
Code name
title.
number as amended plus any local documentation.
Mm-hmm. Any further wordsmithing, or are we good there? Looks like we're good. Looks like Angela's got her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question. So what's the time length that they have to maintain the records? Is it 7 years, or because a permit's valid for 10? Um, so what's the length of time that they're required to maintain those records?
Does it say in the code, Nora?
7.
Okay.
Either
So should it be should it be record retention for the life of as long as the permit is valid? Because if it's a 10-year permit, are you getting rid of records 7 years in,
8 years in.
8 years in?
So, but these records have also been reviewed during our annual compliance monitoring.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there isn't in this specific code section, so I'm not sure what it's like.
Is the task force comfortable with 7 years, or should we ask for longer? So you go for the 7 to match state regs?
Yeah, I mean, so what was the full, permit timeline that we just got?
You still have to apply for an annual license.
So no
You have to
matter
renew
what.
your annual every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The cannabis is kind of unique as far as county discretionary use permits go. Because it's the first time that, or it's really, really rare that we put a cap on the life of a use permit. Typically, it follows the land as long as it's active. So, but for cannabis, they did say, after 10 years. They put an expiration date on it. Okay. Site, code, name, number as amended, and any local requirements. Got that for one.
I think just for the public's knowledge, if we could just highlight, just so everybody knows verbally, what those items are, it's the licenses, cultivation plan, records evidencing compliance with the environmental protection measures, supporting documentation for data or information entered into track and trace, all UID manifests, financial records related to licensed commercial cannabis, personnel records, records related to employee training, contracts with other state licensed cannabis businesses, all permits, licenses, and other authorizations. So just so there's a level of confidence with the public that they know
That's a great
what's
idea.
being checked.
So thank you for listing that. Now that you have, Patrick, does that list of records satisfy what we need for taxation?
I think so, yeah, because, I mean, the primary things we're concerned about are the area involved in cultivation, and is that built into some of those records?
That would be
Yeah,
a
the
site plan.
Okay, all right.
Good. So, Ruby, if you just note that treasurer tax collector Patrick Sullivan was present. How about fire? Is there any additional records that need to be retained?
No, I mean, our record retention, 7 years.
Okay, good.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Margot. All right, go ahead, Margot.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, didn't see the unmute prompt there. So I have a question concerning records retention. Is this going to also cover the annual reports from the county, the inspections?
Oh, we retained those on the county side.
Oh, okay. But what about the records from the permittee as far as, say, well water levels?
I think that's part of the annual reports, what was approved and how much was actually used, right?
So again, I would say that we're going to mirror the state and add any local to that list.
Okay,
So we're going to reference the state code and then add any, if the group wants to add in a 7-year retention of the water logs, 7-year retention of our annual reports. I mean, that's.
But the water logs are part of the annual report, right?
Your annual, yep, you're right.
Yeah.
So there it goes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're reviewing it on an annual level anyway.
Yep. So 7-year retention of the local annual.
Okay,
Yeah.
Right.
Question.
And my concern is that if the permit is for at least 10 years and the earlier records are not retained, then we lose that history. And then if the permit is going to operate in perpetuity, then again, we're losing records.
so I think that we would want to be on that faster than every 10 years, Margot, because then that's why the water use report is part of the annual report that's submitted. So we will not lose that historic data on the county side. It's just
Okay, good.
down there.
Yeah, good. I was just looking in terms of big picture and looking for trends, not as a canary in the coal mine saying, oh my gosh, we're out of water.
Sure, yeah. Then the bigger picture will be helpful as the permit continues and as the business activity continues. Okay, so code name, number as amended, any local requirements, we're good with 7 years like the state. One of the local requirements would be to retain 7 years of our local annual reports. Anything else? If there's nothing else, we'll bring it back to the task force for action. The action that I'm looking at is approval of that recommended amendment to activity records.
I move to approve that amended list of activity records.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We have a 6-0. Okay. Going to the next one. The next one is track and trace. And the discussion that we had at our last meeting was recommending that all permittees enroll and comply with track and trace because currently there's not that requirement. So I'm thinking the hypothetical language will be all permittees shall be enrolled and maintain active enrollment within the track and trace program.
Yeah.
Is everybody here familiar with track and trace? What that means? Okay. Jennifer, could you give us a quick summary of track and trace?
Sure, it's a state program compliance system where every plant is tracked in the state system, whether it's from a seed or from a clone. Once it arrives on site to your cultivation site, or and actually it's not just plants too, it would be products through a distribution center or through retail. Every time that package item changes location, whether it be from farm to retail or retail to or distribution to retail, it's tracked through a state monitoring system, and a manifest tracks that movement. It also on the cultivation side tracks the state of growth of that plant. So if it's an immature plant, it is tracked as such, and then once it gets moved into the field into its permanent location or an indoor into its permanent spot in a grow room, it is then called flowering. And then once it's harvested, it's moved into another growth stage. So at any given time, you can track what one cedar plant, where it is in the system. And once it gets harvested, packaged, moved to distro, and then moved to retail, it maintains a UID tracker that filters all the way back.
And you can do that with manufactured cannabis products as well. So were you to be growing cannabis for biomass, for extraction purposes, and that concentrate was then added to an edible product, you'd be able to track that product back, that oil back, all the way to the plant it came from. So and that's helpful for recalls.
So was that recently updated to include, I mean, that's much more extensive / intensive than That's where we're at with the track and trace.
That's where it's been from prior to even California's adoption.
So, we're gonna be able to actually do this.
Except they are
doing it
doing
right now.
Do it every day.
some amendments to it, right? Like you won't, if the new stuff passes, you won't have to track every single plant, you track a batch of plants.
Right, you still have a number assigned to them, but they won't have to have the plastic tag. So right now, each plant, when it goes into its flowering phase, is required to have a plastic tag with an RFID in it. And then you're required to retain those plastic tags. They're not, you were required until last year to retain them. And so people had bags and bags and bags of tags. Last year
One time
that
use only
changed.
bags.
Yeah, exactly, and they're not recyclable because of the RFID tag in them. And now this year, or a bill passed last year that says that you don't need the individual plant tags anymore. I don't know whether have the regs caught up with that yet, or are you still individual tagging?
We're still individually checking.
So
We were part of the test program, and so we're waiting for that to pass.
So proposed wording could say all permittees shall enroll and comply with track and trace program and maintain enrollment in good standing with the track and trace program for life of permit activity.
Yeah, and that would be, it's the California Cannabis Track and Trace. So that's what the state calls it. The company that they contract with is Metric. But
I would leave that out
Yeah,
in case we go to a different company.
Yeah. Okay, any questions, discussion about that proposed wording amongst task force? Any hands raised in the Zoom room, Ruby?
Currently, no.
We'll bring this proposed wording back to task force for action.
I move to accept the suggested wording of enrollment as it relates to track and trace.
second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there anybody opposed? Once. Next one, weights and measures. We did not make any recommendation or comments that were noted in the minutes on weights and measures. Are we fine with there being no comments? Or no recommendation? Pretty straightforward. I remember that it was fine with the agricultural commissioner last meeting. I think we're good on that one. Okay. Compliance monitoring. The only thing that came out of that we noted was struck me that we should probably look for a more accurate scale of fees that will reflect our fees have to be connected to the cost of doing that business and or us doing the business. So, but that's going to be an internal thing that will then be reflected in the master fee schedule. So the task force doesn't need to take any action on that one. That's more of an internal administrative thing. Was there anything else on compliance monitoring? If you want to take a look, it's in compliance monitoring. Good talk. We did have some discussion about how long, like right now, we're monitoring every year for the first 5 years at least. And if we have no issues, we can reduce it at the discretion of the director. And so we did talk about leaving the that full discretion to just less than 5 years, just as it was worded to allow for flexibility in case there were any concerns. Is the task force still comfortable with that? I see shrugs, good, shrugs of acquiescence. All right, let's go to Zoom room. I don't know who did theirs first. Let's start with Margo. Go ahead.
Thank On compliance monitoring, just for groundwater management, it's prudent to keep to the annual inspection. Now, if community development department or the director of the department wants to delegate the review of the well reports and any kind of analysis of the water situation, water usage by the permittee, that might be a good way to maintain an annual inspection or an annual review of at least the water situation. Because right now there is no oversight of groundwater usage by permittees, and there isn't a way to gauge cumulative effect of water usage by multiple growers in the same aquifer. Thank you.
Thanks, Margot. Who else? Go ahead, Angela.
Thanks, Maria. So for section 3 of the compliance monitoring, I don't know if you guys want to consider maybe just doing reduced inspection frequency to once every other year. I think if you're saying less than or once every 5 years, it's kind of opening up a can of worms. But if we do a frequency of once every other year, if there's no transfer of ownership, because what happens if a permit gets transferred during that tenure and the new owner, they have the 5-year, the waiver. So I would think that a transfer would void any waiver of inspections just because you don't know that the new person that purchases the permit is going to be the same good player as the first 5 years, if that makes sense. So that's my only concern is if we go longer than every other year and if there's a transfer of ownership somewhere in there and there's no inspections. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Looks like Sarah's got her hand up. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi there, good afternoon. This is Sarah Bodner. And I wanted to speak a little bit to cumulative impacts because I think that it's really important to note that when this new ordinance is drafted, the whole ordinance is going to be subject to an EIR because it will be adopted after the state's deadline, which was January 1st, 2020. Okay. Nara, help me out here. Anyway, this is a conditional use permit that will be adopted following the state's exemption from CEQA. And this ordinance is going to have to go through an EIR. And when that happens, it's going to look at cumulative impacts across the county in a way that we haven't had the ability to do up until this point. And the board has already approved that EIR. It happened before Maria's tenure, but they paused on doing it because it didn't make sense to do an EIR until we got the new ordinance into place. So there are steps following this that are going to add diligence and also time to the process of adoption and new levels of environmental review. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Are there any other public comments or can we?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. I know that I had spoken about this last meeting and had thought that an every other year inspection schedule would be good. So I think that I'm just going to make a motion that we move to amend the language to reflect an inspection schedule once every other year unless the permit is transferred to new ownership, in which case an annual inspection would be required. And so now there's a motion on the floor. We can vote on it.
Let me make sure I'm writing that down right. So amend that section 3, if there are no violations of the county permit or state license during the first 5 years, the inspection frequency may be reduced to every other year.
May be reduced to once every other year, unless the permit is transferred to a new owner, in which case an annual inspection will occur.
Well,
Right,
Shall resume.
Shall
Annual
resume.
shall resume.
yeah.
I would second that.
Did you get that, Michelle?
Part
Unless
of it.
ownership
It's
is
also
transferred.
recorded.
Yeah, right. All right, so we have a motion by Rebecca and a second by Jennifer. Oh, just one little bit of scribbling, just say. So when I go back over this like a week from now,
That's okay, we can actually make a motion, have a second, and then once it's seconded, there can be discussion, and then we can vote on it, and then if the motion doesn't pass, somebody else can make a new
Was
motion.
that a second with discussion?
That was a second. I'm very in support of that.
If you hadn't, I would have seconded mostly because it's in line with every one of the public comments as well as what we discussed here. So.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? All right, got that one done. Next one, annual reports and inspections. What did you? We talked about developing a checklist for permittees. That's fine, that's administrative and it's at the department. We don't have to take action on that. But I'm glad that it's captured in these minutes because I'm gonna come back to these minutes as we're rolling things out as well. No one wished to speak. Public input was closed. There wasn't any recommendation noted from the task force.
I think I have any comment I have would be more on a formatting issue. So we're currently under item 6, review of general requirements for all activities. We have activity records.
Formatting, I can tell you, is gonna look a lot better on the new ordinance because this was all housed within Article 27.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I guess I'm just feeling now that as we're going through each one of these alphabetical notes that all of these are really activity records. Track and trace is an activity record, weights and measures are an activity record. So these are all kind of subcategories of activity records. And I guess that it came to light because our complaint records are held within our annual reports and inspections, which are part of compliance monitoring,
Okay,
correct?
well, yeah. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Okay, good. Can you note that, Ruby? That, we'll pay attention to formatting and make sure that all annual compliance monitoring items or activity records are all kind of housed within the same section. No problem. I don't know that the task force needs to take action on that though.
No, yeah, it should just be activity records, and then those would all be subsections until you get to what's the next?
Discussion of new general requirements.
Yeah. All right.
So we were on annual reports and inspections, sorry.
Thank you. So other than development of a checklist for permittees, which will be part of our internal processes.
So will that have any areas that the fire district may have authority over? In the unfiltered areas?
When there's structures. Commercial structures and.
Right, yes, there will be some of those. Mhm. Yeah, we'll make sure that we cover all the items that are necessary for agency review. Any further discussion on this one?
I don't know that I have anything to discuss, but my question is, when you guys generate what those new fees will look like, obviously we'll see them before. Not that we'll change them because, you know, they'll just reflect the cost of those activities.
I'm not planning on bringing it back for review from the task force, but if you remember, I'll try to remind you, it's part of a countywide fee, overall fee structure. So,
Yeah.
That is definitely a public hearing, yes. So in case you forget to mention that it's coming, Michelle.
Ask you.
Yeah.
Sidebar as well, I don't know if everybody knows, but you can now sign up to receive agendas. In your email weekly or when they're
That's
released,
true.
which is really nice for those that don't know. So you'll get you can sign up for BOS and planning agendas.
Indeed,
So cool.
because our goal is to prioritize.
Welcome
public
to the
input.
2020s.
I know, right?
It's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, and additionally, just one plug for the general plan. You can also sign up to get email notifications for our update at lakecounty2050.org.
And is there still a seat open there? While we're
There is a
planning?
tribal representative position open.
Oh, has the cannabis one been filled?
Cannabis one has been filled by Carolyn Hillman from Pasta.
Bravo.
Excellent. Oh, good. I'm glad you're glad. That makes me glad.
That's not me.
All right, so before we move on from annual reports and inspections, You did have a hand up, Angela.
Thank you, Maria. This isn't regarding the performance review reports. So correct me if I'm wrong, you said that it can be reviewed and approved by the planning commission or the director. Is that right?
It's listed as the planning commission and they can defer it to the planning director who will happily defer it to staff.
Oh, okay. So is there any possibility and just because we've seen so much turnover over the years and hopefully you stay, but can we have that so it's reviewed by the planning commission just for transparency reasons? Then we know that there's 5 people looking at it. And I mean, there's what, 150 of them a year. I don't think that the planning commission is so bogged down that they couldn't review those. Just to throw that out there.
Commission would disagree with you. Adding 150 annual reviews is probably something they're not willing to do. Yeah, and especially as we continue to approve more permits, that would get even increasingly cumbersome.
Okay, so would you consider maybe creating like a 3-body panel in your department that reviews these? I just feel a little uncomfortable having them be reviewed by one person, knowing that there's so many that have different conditions of use, depending on, some places have where you can't have certain structures, or there's just different conditions of use for different permits. So just want to make sure that everybody's complying with what they were approved for.
That's an interesting suggestion. I also am very uncomfortable with me being the only one going over them.
Do you think, Maria, that maybe you could bring them as bring a group of them as one agenda item to the planning commission, and then you would recommend to approve all of them unless there's ones you don't want to approve, and they could be just like mass approve them unless there were other complaints for hearing one specifically. Is that a way that maybe that could be accomplished without them having to hear 150? I don't know.
I actually think if the task force is amenable, we'll work on a few options for the next meeting. I see a couple nods.
Yeah.
People are interested in this. Yeah, I think it is an interesting issue. Ongoing monitoring with a staff that does turn over from time to time, I think is a reasonable concern. Patrick?
One point that I would add, Bill, about the appointed body like the planning commission, is that there are some pieces of the CDD records that aren't subject to public disclosure related to some of the businesses. So I don't know everything that ends up in the annual report, but if you do post it, if it's going to go to the planning commission to approve, then you have to get into the whole redaction issues and other things that we haven't had to contend with before. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Take that into consideration. Ruby, would you please make note that we're going to bring the staff and bring this back, a selection of options at a future meeting. And this is specific to the annual reports and inspections. Actually, it's specific to the reports. There aren't that many things that are not public records within planning records, but there are a couple just off the top of my head, cultural resource studies, as well as building plans that are stamped by architects. So that's considered proprietary information.
There's a few intersections with tax that
Yeah, that's where
that make it.
we get into something that you know better than I know. Yeah. Okay, but we will work on that. Anything further on that item, or are we going on to complaint records? Complaint records, which we had no recommendations. Which, as it stands, it says the permittee shall maintain a record of all complaints and resolution of complaints and provide a tally and summary of issues at the annual performance review reports. How long are we retaining complaint records? We don't really identify. Would that just be included in the 7 years?
7 years.
Okay. Should we state that, or is it understood under records retention?
I think it should be, it's one of these stages, a lot of people don't think about keeping their complaints. I mean, think about legal documents, but a complaint is simply just that of somebody's personal opinion.
But the complaints are tracked in our annual review, our annual report.
True, they're included there. Okay.
All of this ends up falling underneath the new subheading. Then it would follow. Be part of that 7 years.
You're right, which is stated at the beginning, so okay, we're still working under that.
And then if there are complaints, then you don't get 100% on your review, and then you're not subject to skipping that every other year. So I think it protects the public. I think it protects the public enough.
Okay. Any further discussion? At this point, we have no amendments. Hands raised in the Zoom, don't see any. Bringing it back, oh, we don't have anything, so we'll just skip that one. Okay. Identification of emergency contacts. Again, we made no recommendations on that one. Has anybody changed their mind? Oh, there it is. Okay. Applicant shall make every good faith effort to encourage neighborhood residents to call his designated person to resolve operating problems, if any, before any calls or complaints are made to the county. Yeah, good luck with that.
This references specifically cannabis manufacturing premises. And that's. We need to change that.
That's interesting,
Yeah, I
right?
don't know if that may be just maybe that was previous county language that referenced all cannabis activity. But
Okay.
since that's a designated license type under the state.
So how do we want to amend this to apply to all cannabis related businesses?
Well, I think you could just remove that sentence, right?
It's all the way through that whole paragraph, so we'd have to just take out manufacturing.
Yeah.
Take out manufacturing. So the plan shall include name, phone number, and facsimile number or email address of an individual working on cannabis premises, to whom notice of problems associated with the operation of the cannabis establishment can be provided. The cannabis establishment shall keep this information current at all times. Good, okay. Any further discussion with the task force on changing that language to just remove manufacturing? Any hands raised in Zoom? Bring it back to the task force.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Excellent. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed? Okay, passes 6-0. Discussion on new general requirements will take place at a future meeting. Okay, so we have recaptured and formalized the activity that we talked about last meeting. We're about at the end of what we have for the task force to consider today. So it'll take a little bit of time for our staff to prepare the next batch. But I think that we'll probably do it in pretty much the same way we've been coming along. So I really like the way Andrew kind of presented it to us. It seems easy bites of it. So we'll keep going after that on the next few general statements. And another thing that we're going to need to plan is once we get done with our general stuff, let's go back. In fact, Ruby, what I'd like to do is add an item of review of the Board of Supervisors approval. So we can start figuring out where we're going to go forward on the business related specifics.
So so I see we have pesticides here, but is there, can we add in hazmat, so we're talking about fuel storage, which would, greater than 55 gallons of accumulated hazardous material would require a hazmat business plan under Health and Safety Code 6.95. And then if they have storage accumulations of petroleum products greater than 1,320 gallons, it generates an SPCC, a spill prevention countermeasure control plan. So those are kind of critical parts for us and the fire service, as everything is entered into CERS, the California Environmental Reporting System, that is on our tablets. So when we roll into a facility, we know exactly what their business is, where their materials are, what they're going to do for cleanup.
Section with me.
Right here under prohibited activities.
So under pesticides,
Yeah, just having that activities. And then with that would generate if they have hazardous waste such as they're changing oils in the generators and things like that.
So isn't there some language that would be adherence to,
Health and Safety Code 6.95 and the Clean Water Act are the two premier.
Okay. Yeah, and then under the general performance standards, there's fire under development standards, performance standards as well. So it's in there too.
All right, so this is stuff we're gonna get started on for the next meeting. So I think we've all kind of made a mental note in case you're not here at the next meeting.
Please come to the next meeting.
I will, the fire chief's been working on the hazard or the hazard mitigation impact fees. So the last 40 days has been overwhelming. We'll be coming to the county here for this increasing our impact fees from, what they were almost 30 years ago to some of the new standards. So we've all been, I apologize, we haven't been here.
No,
It's
that's pretty
been,
important,
so those that have a county and a city entity, it takes your time. So we apologize.
Well,
Thank you.
all the time that I've spent on county stuff, fire guys are the ones that we get them when we can. If you're not here, it's not because you're sitting around. So, yeah, so we definitely do appreciate your input too.
absolutely, and kind of in line with that, we've had a cursory call with the sheriff. And he was bringing up the background checks with his staff this week at a staff meeting. And so I know that they were going to discuss it. So when we circle back to that part of this discussion, if we could make it so that the sheriff can attend,
Yeah.
that would be fantastic.
Okay, so when we get back to background checks and clearances, because we've kind of just passed through that one.
Yeah, that was something we were trying to figure out some language.
Okay. Okay, so next week, if the sheriff's available, we'll add background checks and clearances, maybe.
Next
And
week
your
or next meeting.
next meeting. Thank you.
He had some valuable commentary in our conversation that I think
Yeah,
would be
That'd be
important to
great.
this.
it's good to hear what the experts are saying, the ones who are doing this. And then we'll also make sure that Ruby is gonna watch the video and capture all that stuff that Willie just said that was kind of mostly English. And we'll
It
get
stopped
that
at
added.
health and safety.
Health and safety
Should
code
have
and stuff,
something,
yeah. And let's make sure we add that. We'll have another discussion about compliance monitoring, it's specific to that matter, and talk about amending language.
If you have any questions, shoot me an email and I'll follow up for you.
What was the health and safety code that you read?
6.95. And Lake County Environmental Health is really the gatekeeper of that. They have the SPCC is for petroleum, they have the hazmat business plans, and then they have the California Accident Release Program, which are about 13 facilities, which is either like large storage of propane or ammonia. And so they run all of those, but that all filters down to us individual agencies.
Typically, we have a condition of approval that speaks to the amount of hazardous waste that's allowed.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
On background checks, yes. By way of reference, didn't get into the meat and potatoes of this, but Riverside County, when they adopted their ordinance for all of this, if you had operated anything illegally, so if you had operated a grow or if you'd operated a shop, storefront, whatever, illegally, because that's what kind of happened down there when all this, when the voters voted it in, everybody, the operators, oh, hey, we're free to go. And the county put a stop on that. But they said, if you had been caught operating illegally, you weren't eligible to even apply. There was no exemption.
And that was a county jurisdiction.
That was
Not a state.
Yeah, that was
I think
River,
most of our background checks at this point have just been mirroring state stuff.
right, but they did it county, that if you operated, so you couldn't even you weren't gonna get your license, you weren't gonna get a permit to grow or to open a storefront, period. And there was no expiration on that. It didn't say you had to wait 5 years or 10 years. It said, if you were caught, you don't get one, period.
Ruby, we're taking this in under public comment, by the way. in that section.
So
I don't
I
want us
guess,
to be bouncing back and forth with stuff on the agenda, but we need to capture this data.
yeah, I guess offer that up as, you know, I have, just coming from that area, I can tell you that that's what they were very serious about. They had to get very serious about it. It was a much bigger problem down there. Grows,
Yeah.
not so much, but storefronts, huge problem down there.
Right, like whack-a-mole from what I've been reading. So,
It
in a lot of
was-
the jurisdictions.
I watched them do a raid. We had 3 shops open in our little unincorporated burg. And they came in, shut down all 3. 2 of them were reopened the next day. And they
Wow.
did this like 6 weeks in a row, 8 weeks in a row until they finally came in and loaded up all their stuff and just took it.
Right,
So.
yeah, we don't want that mess. Okay, is there any other public comments? I see Angela. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
she's
Angela.
Yes. So you started at activity records, letter F. Is there a reason that we skipped over A, B, C, D, and E? Because those are highlighted with amendments in the packet. Thank
I started with what we had discussed last week. No, that's all the later ones. A through E.
Yeah,
Yep.
because in the packet they're highlighted and had changes or recommendations on them, like Andrew had
Yeah, we
already.
did not take action on those.
A lot of those are ones where we're waiting for
Wording.
language, yeah, so there's background checks is one
All
of
right,
them.
let's put A through E back on next week's, or next meeting. And I think that might also, which section was? This one is prohibited activities. All right, so we'll go through A through E. I think we've done the rest of the sections, and then we'll keep going. And that will be the prohibited activities that have the pesticides. We'll make sure we catch that next meeting. We will invite Sheriff Howell if he's available. If not, then we'll cover that at the meeting after that. Any further public input? If not, we will take a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, Holly.
Oh, Holly? Oh, great. Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, hi, thanks. Sometimes it's hard to hear, so I just wanted to double check. At the next meeting, you'll be going through besides background checks and the reports, et cetera. The prohibited activities that are set out in section A plus hazmat.
Next week, we anticipate going through the items on today's agenda on 4A through E. I don't think we're doing annual reports and inspections anymore. But we're gonna do A through E and then move on to what we haven't done yet, which is 73.3. No, wait. We're gonna move on to whatever's past identification, emergency identification. And keep going. We're also gonna have a review of the board's action taken at their December 27th meeting and discuss next steps.
Okay, but you're going to put on the agenda the prohibited activities 1 through 6 plus hazmat?
They make sure,
Yeah, 73.4.
yes, yeah, starting at restrictions and prohibited activities.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thanks.
Okay. If there's no further action, discussion, or conversation, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. Thanks, everybody.
I'll see you in 45 minutes.
See you in 45 minutes.